The first step in antenatal care is confirmation of pregnancy. The simplest way to confirm pregnancy in the first trimester itself is to conduct a urine examination using a pregnancy test kit. The kit detects pregnancy on the basis of it. The kit basically detects the presence of HCG in the urine. The test can be performed soon after a missed period and is simple to perform. The pregnancy test should be offered to any woman who is in the reproductive age group and comes with a history of amenorrhea or other symptoms of pregnancy. The kit, which is made available by the Government of India, is called as Nishchay. In addition, other kits are available in the market, and the Nishchay is the kit which is provided to ASHA and other link workers by the government. Antenatal care literally means care of the woman during pregnancy. The aim of antenatal care is to achieve a healthy mother and a healthy baby at the end of the pregnancy. Hence, antenatal care should begin soon after conception. Regular monitoring during pregnancy would help in detecting complications at an early stage itself before they become life-threatening emergencies. However, one must realize that even with utmost care and most effective screening tools, one cannot predict which women will develop pregnancy-related complications, which can come anytime. And hence, every pregnant woman should be educated for birth preparedness and complication readiness. What are the objectives of antenatal care? That is what we should achieve by providing antenatal care, is to promote to better the health of the mother during pregnancy and to protect and maintain this health. To detect cases which may be high risk and give special attention to them, be extra vigilant with them. To foresee complications and prevent them. To ensure that antenatal care is used as an opportunity to detect other health problems which may be coexisting, would have gone undetected and would have presented at a later stage. To make sure that services are available to manage obstetric emergencies. We talked about that an emergency can land any time during pregnancy and childbirth, despite the best management. And hence services should be identified and available to manage these unforeseen emergencies. Prepare the pregnant women and their families for eventuality of such an emergency. To remove the anxiety and dread which is associated with delivery and make her comfortable with being a mother. To teach the mother child care, child nutrition, personal hygiene and sanitation. Ultimately, the aim is to reduce maternal and infant mortality and morbidity rates, to sensitize the mother to family planning, and to attend to other children, under 5 children, who come to the clinic with a mother. So what are the components of antenatal care? What all we do while providing antenatal care? Antenatal visits by the mother, prenatal advice for health of both the mother and the child, giving specific health protection, mental preparation of the mother and the family for arrival of the newborn, family planning promotion, and the pediatric component, that is taking care of under 5s which accompany the mother to the clinic. Antenatal visits. When should these visits be made ideally? Ideally, the first visit should be made in the first trimester itself, that is before the 12th week of pregnancy. But however, if the woman comes later in her pregnancy for registration, she should be registered and care should be given according to the gestational age. What is the ideal frequency for antenatal visits? If everything is normal, once a month for first 7 months, once in 2 weeks for the 8th month, and once a week in the 9th month. But for a high proportion of mothers, especially in the lower socioeconomic group, it may not be possible for the mothers to make so many antenatal visits. These are around 10 visits due to reasons like the antenatal clinic may be far away from home, or going for the antenatal visit may translate into loss of wage for that day, and other personal reasons. So in such cases, what is the minimum number of antenatal visits that we would like to advise? In these cases, a minimum number of 4 antenatal visits should be made as per the following schedule. First visit in the first trimester, that is within 12 weeks or as soon as the pregnancy is suspected. In this visit, registration of pregnancy is done and first antenatal checkup is done. In the second visit should be between 4th and 6th months. Third visit should be in the 8th month and fourth visit should be in the 9th month. If the pregnant woman prefers visiting the A&M, an auxiliary nurse midwife, for antenatal checkup, then at least the third antenatal visit should be made to the medical officer, to the doctor at the nearest PHC. Then the importance of early registration of pregnancy. The registration of pregnancy within the first 12 weeks is primarily the responsibility of the A&M, auxiliary nurse midwife. She can use the village health nutrition day for motivating the women for early registration. Why is early registration important? It facilitates proper planning and allows for adequate care. It helps the mother remember her LMP, last menstrual period. Later on she will forget. So the date of LMP can be recorded and expected date of delivery can be calculated. The baseline information on blood pressure, weight, hemoglobin level can be recorded and later measurements can be compared against this. The health status or any already existing medical illness can be detected in time and treated. It also helps in timely detection of complications. It especially helps to confirm if the pregnancy is wanted, because if it is unwanted, there is a need to refer the women to the nearest PHC at the earliest for safe abortion services. But in this case, possibility of sex-selective abortion should always be ruled out. Early registration would start the women on regular dose of iron folic acid. Early detection of pregnancy and provision of care from this stage itself facilitate building up of good interpersonal relationship between the caregiver and the pregnant woman, and then it will be easier to advise her for her own well-being and she would follow the advice as she has rapport with the caregiver. Now, after the discussion that early registration is so important, we have to ensure that complete registration is done. That is, each and every pregnancy in the area should be registered so that proper antenatal care can be provided and lives of mother and child can be saved, ultimately leading to lower maternal mortality and infant mortality rate. So how can an A&M ensure that there is complete registration of pregnant women? The A&M should calculate the estimated number of pregnancies in 1 year in her area, and then she can match this estimated number with the actual number of pregnancies which are registered with her. In any month, the number of registered antenatal women should be half of the estimated annual number, because each pregnancy lasts for 9 months and mostly the registration is towards the end of the first trimester. So 6 months of antenatal care would be provided. Hence, the number of registered women should be half of the estimated annual number. So how would she calculate the annual number? How would she estimate the annual number of pregnancies? Calculation of the estimated number of pregnancies in 1 year. Obtain information regarding the population size under her jurisdiction and the birth rate of the area. Then the expected number of live births can be calculated by the formula, that is birth rate divided by 1000 into the population size. But all pregnancies do not result in live births. Some may result in abortions or stillbirths. Hence, if we just calculate the number of live births, it will be an underestimation of the number of pregnant women. So a correction factor of 10% is used for accommodating the pregnancy wastage that we have listed above. Hence, the total number of pregnancies in 1 year can be estimated to be estimated live births by the above formula plus 10% of the live births estimated. In any month, the number of registered pregnancies should be half of this number. If the registered number of women is lesser than expected, the ANM should approach community leaders and key people in the community to ensure that unregistered women are contacted and get registered for antenatal care. Some women may be receiving antenatal care from private sector. Their names and the private clinic's name should be entered in the register. This register is known as the antenatal register. In the antenatal register, the ANM should keep track of all the pregnant women in her area. Whether she is receiving care from government sector or any private sector, whatever is her choice, the name should be there in the antenatal register. If the pregnant woman does not turn up for a scheduled visit, ANM must follow her and counsel her for coming for antenatal checkup. Recently, a name-based tracking system has been introduced for tracking women for their antenatal care and then their children for immunizations. This is known as Mother and Child Tracking System, MCTS. This system gives feedback to the ANM also whether the child is getting regularly immunized or not. First antenatal checkup, that is what all to do in the first antenatal visit. The first antenatal visit is recommended as soon as the pregnancy is suspected. This is meant for registration of the pregnancy in the antenatal register and the first antenatal checkup, which should include a detailed history, complete physical examination of the mother, abdominal examination, assessment of gestational age, and laboratory investigations. We will talk about these in detail in the following slides. What to ask in the detailed medical history? Age of the mother is noted, establishing that pregnancy is indeed the cause of present amenorrhea, the birth order of present pregnancy, the birth interval of the present pregnancy, confirm that the pregnancy is wanted and not a result of contraceptive failure. This is important because during the first visit, if it is made early, MTPE may still be feasible. For recording the last menstrual period, LMP, and calculate the expected date of delivery, which will be LMP plus 9 months and 7 days. To find out if there were any complications during previous pregnancies which might repeat this time. To detect any current medical complication in the present pregnancy. To record symptoms to rule out complications like fever, persistent vomiting, abnormal vaginal discharge, vaginal bleeding, palpitations, easy fatigability, breathlessness at rest, generalized swelling in the body, severe headache, blurring of vision, burning micturition, decreased fetal movements or absent fetal movements. Now then ask for history of any current systemic illness like hypertension, diabetes mellitus, heart disease, tuberculosis, renal disease, epilepsy, asthma, etc. Family history of hypertension, diabetes mellitus, twins, congenital malformation, any history of drug allergies or drug addiction. Then comes complete physical examination. The activity would be almost the same in all the visits, in the first visit and the subsequent visits. But the readings in the first visit may be taken as the baseline and the findings in the later visits can be compared with these readings. Look for pallor. For pallor, examine the conjunctiva, nails, tongue, oral mucosa and palms of the woman. And clinical pallor should be correlated with hemoglobin estimation. Take pulse, respiratory rate, look for edema. Edema which appears in the evening and disappears after a full night's sleep is normal during pregnancy, but any edema on the face, hands, abdominal wall or vulva is abnormal. Edema should be suspected if the woman complains of tightening of rings on her fingers, and this symptom should be taken seriously. If edema is found and is coexists with hypertension, heart disease, anemia, proteinuria, the woman should be immediately referred to the medical officer for further management. Blood pressure. Blood pressure should be measured at every visit. The main purpose of measuring blood pressure is to rule out the hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. Hypertension is diagnosed if two consecutive readings taken 4 hours apart show the systolic BP to be more than 140 or equal to 140, or diastolic BP to be 90 or more. Hypertension detected during pregnancy may be pregnancy-induced hypertension or a pre-existing hypertension, that is a hypertensive woman who has conceived. But if hypertension is diagnosed, check urine for presence of albumin. Presence of albumin in urine with hypertension, she should be categorized as preeclampsia and referred immediately to a 24-hour FRU, first referral unit. If the diastolic BP is as high as more than 110 mm of mercury, this is a danger sign of imminent eclampsia. And if urine albumin is also positive in such a patient, she should be referred to an FRU immediately. But if urine albumin is negative, we can refer to the medical officer at the nearest 24/7 primary health center. A woman with pregnancy-induced hypertension, preeclampsia or imminent eclampsia, as we have discussed above, need hospitalization for regular monitoring of blood pressure, level of protein and fetal condition at the nearest first referral unit or 24/7 PHC. Weight should be measured at every visit. The weight at first visit should be treated as the baseline weight, so that we can calculate the weight gained in the subsequent antenatal visits. In a normal pregnancy, a woman should gain 9 to 11 kgs of weight. That is 2 kg per month after the first trimester. That is, from the second trimester, she should gain 2 kgs per month or half a kg per week. If she gains less than 2 kg per month after the first trimester, an inadequate dietary intake should be suspected. Low weight gain leads to intrauterine growth retardation and ultimately low birth weight baby. If there is an excessive weight gain, which is more than 3 kgs in a month, it can be due to preeclampsia, multiple pregnancy, diabetes. So take her blood pressure and test her urine for albumin and sugar for preeclampsia. And if the BP is high along with positive for albumin and sugar in urine, refer her to medical officer as preeclampsia. Breast examination. The purpose of breast examination in the antenatal visit is to ensure that there is no hindrance in establishing breastfeeding after the newborn. So there should be smooth initiation of breastfeeding to ensure that. So look for inverted or flat nipples because it hinders the perfect latching of the infant with the breast. Crusting and soreness of the nipples, mother would avoid breastfeeding in such a case. So treat these crusting and soreness and palpate for any presence of any lumps or tenderness so as to rule out any other disease of the breast. Vaginal examination may be required. If the ultrasound or any other method is not available to confirm the pregnancy, then vaginal examination may be the only method which confirms presence of pregnancy. Vaginal examination may also be needed to measure the gestational age in absence of ultrasound or any other method, especially during the first trimester of pregnancy before the uterus becomes an abdominal organ. A per speculum examination may be required if the woman complains of any discharge per vaginum, because this will help her in defining whether the discharge is vaginal or cervical and the type of discharge, which is useful in making a diagnosis of reproductive tract infection and managing the case accordingly. Abdominal examination is done to measure the fundal height, because fundal height indicates the progress of pregnancy and the fetal growth. Like in 12 weeks, the fundus should be just palpable per abdomen. By 20th week, it is at the lower border of the umbilicus. By 36 weeks, it is felt, the fundus of the uterus is felt at the level of the xiphy's sternum. So, the duration of pregnancy according to the fundal height should be expressed in terms of completed weeks. If the height of the uterus is more than what is indicated by the period of amenorrhea, that is the LMP, the possible reasons can be wrong date of last menstrual period, or full bladder, that is the examiner has forgotten to ask the patient to empty her bladder before examination, multiple pregnancy, polyhydramnios, hereditary-form mole pregnancy, pregnancy along with coexisting pelvic tumor. But if the height of the uterus is less than what is indicated by LMP, the possible reason could be again wrong date of LMP, intrauterine growth retardation, or a missed abortion or intrauterine death. Again hereditary-form mole. Next, listen for fetal heart sounds. These can be heard only after the 24 weeks of pregnancy. The fetal heart rate is 120 to 160 per minute. It is usually heard best in the midline. And after 28th week, the location may change as the position and lie of the fetus changes. Both fetal bradycardia, that is fetal heart rate less than 120 beats per minute, and fetal tachycardia, that is more than 160 beats per minute, indicate fetal distress and requires immediate referral and management. Palpate fetal movements. They can be felt by the examiner after 18 to 22 weeks on gentle palpation. Palpate for fetal parts. They can be felt around 22nd weeks of gestation. After 28th week, it is possible to distinguish the head, back and limbs of the fetus by parabdominal examination. Detection of multiple pregnancy. The uterus would feel larger than the estimated gestational age. Multiple fetal parts are felt on palpation. And if a multiple pregnancy is suspected, refer the women to a first referral unit, because the labor in this case would require expert management. And for biabdominal examination, fetal lie and presentation can be decided. And this is relevant only after 32 weeks of gestation, because before that the fetus changes its presentation and lies number of times. Assessment of gestational age and to see whether it matches with the LMP or not. The most accurate gold standard for assessing the gestational age is ultrasound assessment of the fetal measurements. That is measuring the fetus with the help of ultrasound, which is now done routinely, and this is best done in the first trimester. The best obstetric estimate of gestational age combines the findings of the ultrasound and the last menstrual period date. Clinical assessment based on LMP was previously the only method, that is clinical assessment on per-abdominal examination was used to be the only method before ultrasound became widespread. Still, in some lower income settings, skilled technicians may not be available to operate the ultrasound, or the first semester registration may be low, so an ultrasound in the second semester is only second better. In such settings, fundal height measurement and clinical assessment, fundal height measurement can provide an estimation of gestational age, and if after the childbirth, the examination of the newborn can give the approximate gestational age of the child, whether the child is preterm and how many weeks. Assessment of gestational age by per-abdominal examination. Ask the woman to empty her bladder completely immediately before proceeding with the abdominal examination. This is important because even half full bladder might result in an increase in the fundal height. So that will wrongly give an increased gestational age. At the 12th week, the fundus is just palpable above the symphysis pubis. 16th week, lower 1/3 of the distance between symphysis pubis and umbilicus. 20th week, lower 2/3 of the distance between symphysis pubis and umbilicus. 24th week, at the level of the umbilicus. 28th week, lower 1/3 of the distance between the umbilicus and xiphisternum. 32nd week, 2/3 distance between the umbilicus and xiphisternum. 36th week, at the level of xiphisternum. At the 40th week, the uterus sinks back to the level of 32 weeks, but the flanks become full, unlike that in 32nd week. Laboratory investigations to be performed during antenatal visits. Some of the investigations can be done at the level of subcenter itself. For other investigations, the women may have to go to the nearest primary health center or community health center or the first referral unit. The investigations which can be performed at the subcenter level: pregnancy detection test at the first visit itself using that Nischay kit, estimation of hemoglobin level, presence of albumin and sugar in urine, and rapid malaria test, that is malaria diagnosis by using kit. For the following investigations, the women may have to go to PHC, blood grouping and RH typing, VDRL, HIV testing, a rapid malaria test if it is not available at the subcenter, it may not be there at the subcenter sometimes, blood sugar testing, and present for Australia antigen for hepatitis B infection and for detection of bacteriuria. So after the first detailed antenatal visit, at the subsequent antenatal visits, history is taken, physical examination which includes taking weight at every visit, measuring BP at every visit, respiratory rate, pallor, edema, abdominal examination for assessing fetal growth, fetal lie, auscultation of fetal heart, assessment of pelvis in the later stages of pregnancy. Examination of the pelvis is required to assess if it is adequate enough for delivering the baby vaginally. They should be done during the last NC visits, that is around 36 weeks of gestation, to rule out any cephalopelvic disproportion because it will have a major effect on the management of childbirth. Lab investigation at every visit should be done, which include hemoglobin, urine test for sugar and albumin. What prenatal advice is to be given to the mother during antenatal visits? Following interventions and counseling are given during the antenatal visits. Iron and folic acid supplementation details would be covered later. Tetanus toxoid immunization will be covered later in the lecture. Advice regarding personal care, self-nutrition, family planning, parenting, for identification of high-risk cases and referral if necessary. Home visits should be made by the female health worker or trained eye to assess the home atmosphere and to inform the women about birth preparedness and complication readiness. Birth preparedness, like identification of a skilled provider for birth. She should identify who would carry out the labor. Explain to her why delivery at a health facility is recommended over home delivery. To identify support people at that time, to know the signs of labor and come for assistance at the onset. Complication readiness includes knowledge about danger signs. So women would know about danger signs and access any health center if these arise. Location of nearest health center or first referral unit in cases so that she can quickly approach if any complication arises. Identification of transport facilities. She can keep transport facility ready, she or her family, to identify transport which would be used if in case any complication arises. Preparedness for blood donation, that is identify someone who would donate blood and inform her about various initiatives like Janani Suraksha Yojana and other government initiatives in the area. The prenatal advice should cover the following areas. That is not just pregnancy and delivery, but family and child care, family care and child care. So women should be advised regarding the following during prenatal advice: diet and rest, personal hygiene, drugs, radiation, warning signs for complications, ways of child care, family planning, family budgeting, etc. These will be dealt with in details in the following slides. What should be advised to a pregnant woman? First, advice regarding diet and rest. Child survival is closely correlated with the birth weight, and birth weight is closely correlated to the weight gain during pregnancy. So a normal pregnancy results in a weight gain of 9 to 11 kgs. That means there's a need for extra calorie and nutrition and nutrient requirements. If maternal stores of iron are poor, it is possible that the fetus is born with insufficient iron stores. A baby with insufficient iron stores may show normal hemoglobin at birth, but lacks the stores of iron. And the rapid growth and increase in blood volume with growth and increase in the muscle mass in the first year of life leads to depletion of any iron that may be stored. And other stresses like malaria and infections will make this deficiency even more acute. And the child can, as a result, become severely anemic during early months of life. A pregnant woman needs 300 extra calories per day compared to the usual diet. So remember, 300 extra kilocalories. Similarly, 550 kilocalories extra during lactation. Hence, the women's food intake should be rich in protein, iron, vitamin A and other essential micronutrients. Some recommended dietary items are cereal, milk and milk products, green leafy vegetables, other vegetables, pulses, eggs, meat, fish and poultry if she is a vegetarian, nuts, jaggery for iron, fruit. But remember that food taboos must be considered while counseling regarding her dietary intake. The local food taboos. Sleep. Advice regarding sleep. She is advised to sleep for 8 hours at night and take rest for another 2 hours during the day. Work. She should refrain from doing heavy physical work, such as construction work or full-time farm work, labor work, because hard physical labor can adversely affect the birth weight of the baby. All pregnant women especially late in pregnancy, should be told to avoid the supine position while sleeping. Because in supine position, the gravid uterus exerts pressure on the main large pelvic veins, which results in reduced blood return to the right side of the heart, and this can cause reduced oxygenation and fainting attacks, a condition known as supine hypotension syndrome. Advice regarding personal hygiene. She should avoid constipation by regular intake of fiber like green leafy vegetable, fruit, extra fluids, and should avoid purgatives, especially like castor oil. Mild, moderate exercise is advised like light household work. Manual physical labor during late pregnancy may adversely affect the fetus. Smoking should be cut down to minimum or stopped. Expectant mothers who smoke heavily produce babies that are much smaller than average. And the reason is that nicotine has a vasoconstrictor influence on the uterus and induces a degree of placental insufficiency. Adverse effects of smoking range from low birth weight to increased risk of perinatal death. Women who smoke during pregnancy give birth to babies who on an average weigh 170 grams lesser than the babies of non-smokers. The perinatal mortality is between 10 to 40 times percent higher among smokers than non-smokers. Alcohol as such can cause fertility problem, and moderate to heavy drinking during pregnancy have a greater risk of pregnancy loss. If the pregnancy is not lost, the children may have physical and mental problems. A syndrome called fetal alcohol syndrome has been associated with heavy drinking during pregnancy. Advice regarding sexual intercourse. Sexual intercourse is safe during normal pregnancy if everything is fine, but it should be avoided if there is a risk of abortion, like history of previous recurrent spontaneous abortions or any other risk factor for preterm delivery, etc. Advice regarding intake of drugs. In general, use of drugs should be avoided if they are not absolutely essential during pregnancy. And certain drugs may cause fetal malformation, for example thalidomide. Another example is LSD, which can cause chromosomal abnormality. Streptomycin used during pregnancy can cause eighth nerve damage in the fetus, resulting in deafness. Iodide containing preparations may cause congenital goiter in the fetus. Corticosteroids may impair fetal growth. Sex hormones may cause virilism in the fetus. Tetracycline may affect growth of bones and enamel formation. Anesthetic agents like pethidine administered during labor can have depressant effect on the respiration of the baby and can delay the onset of breathing. Later in puerperium, if the mother is breastfeeding, there are certain drugs which are excreted in the breast milk and she should be careful. Another point of concern is radiation. Exposure to radiation is a danger to the developing fetus. The most common source of radiation during pregnancy is abdominal X-rays during pregnancy. Studies have shown that mortality rate due to leukemia and other neoplasms was significantly higher among children who were exposed during intrauterine period to X-rays. Congenital malformations like microcephaly are also more common in such cases. Hence, an X-ray during pregnancy should be carried out only and only for definite indications, and that too with X-ray dose kept to minimum. Among all women of childbearing age, elective X-rays should be avoided in 2 weeks preceding the menstrual period. The mother should be told about certain warning signs, mother and the family that is. Swelling of feet, fits that is seizures, severe headache, blurring of vision, bleeding per vaginum or discharge per vaginum, or any other unusual symptoms. She should be taught basic things about child care regarding nutrition, child rearing, family planning, education, family budgeting, like life as a mother. Protection for specific health conditions during antenatal visits. Following specific health problems are to be taken care of: anemia, other nutrition deficiencies, toxemias of pregnancy, tetanus in the newborn, that is neonatal tetanus, syphilis, German measles or rubella, Rh status and HIV infection, hepatitis B infection, and genetic screening, advice regarding prenatal genetic screening. An important problem is anemia in pregnancy. Prevalence of anemia has been shown to be 50 to 60% among low socioeconomic status women, especially during third trimester of pregnancy. And the major factors responsible for these are iron and folic acid deficiencies. Anemia during pregnancy is associated with premature birth, postpartum hemorrhage and death, puerperal sepsis, thromboembolic phenomena. So iron and folic acid supplementation is to be routinely done during pregnancy, and this includes 1 tablet of iron folic acid, which contains 100 mg of elemental iron, and 0.5 mg of folic acid, or 500 microgram. 0.5 mg is same as 500 micrograms of folic acid every day for at least 100 days. This is the prophylactic dose of iron folic acid tablets. But if the woman is found to be anemic, that is hemoglobin less than 11, or she clinically has pallor, then she should be given 2 tablets per day for 3 months. So this means a woman with anemia in pregnancy needs to take at least 200 tablets of iron folic acid. This is the therapeutic dose of iron folic acid. Iron folic acid is also to be given in the purpurium, which we will discuss on a lecture on purpurium. IFA tablets should be started as early as possible, preferably as soon as the pregnancy is registered, but care should be given to women who are unable to tolerate because of nausea and vomiting in the first trimester. So just take care of that, and it should be started as early as possible. Other nutritional deficiencies should also be prevented. Toxemias of pregnancy are a very serious complication, and early detection and management is indicated. If the blood pressure at any time is high, that is 140/90, or diastolic more than 90, check the BP after 1 hour again. If it is still high, test the woman's urine for albumin. The combination of high BP and proteinuria is sufficient to categorize the woman as having preeclampsia. And if the diastolic BP is very high, that is more than 110 mg of mercury, it is a danger sign pointing towards severe eclampsia. The woman with the severe eclampsia should be referred immediately to the first referral unit after giving a dose of nifedipine. A woman with pregnancy-induced hypertension, that is preeclampsia, requires hospitalization with daily monitoring of blood pressure and the level of protein in urine and fetal conditions. Prophylaxis of neonatal tetanus. For this, administration of 2 doses of tetanus toxoid to a pregnant woman is an important step. If the woman has not been immunized earlier, then 2 doses of tetanus toxoid have to be given. The first dose should be given just after the first trimester, or as soon as the woman registers for antenatal care, whichever is later. The second dose should be given 1 month after the first dose, but at least 1 month before the expected date of delivery. The minimum interval between 2 doses should be 1 month. If the woman has reported very late in pregnancy, she should be given at least single dose of tetanus toxoid. If the woman has received tetanus toxoid during a previous pregnancy, then only 1 booster dose would suffice in this pregnancy. And this booster dose would cover even the subsequent pregnancies in the next 5 years. It is advised not to inject tetanus toxoid at every successive pregnancy, because this will lead to hyperimmunization and its own side effects. But if you are in doubt about the immunization status of the woman, give 2 injections 1 month apart. Problem of syphilis during pregnancy. It is a preventable cause of pregnancy wastage in some countries because pregnancies with primary and secondary syphilis often result in spontaneous abortion, stillbirths, perinatal deaths, or congenital syphilis in the newborn. So syphilis infection in pregnancy is transmissible to the fetus. And neurological damage with mental retardation is a serious consequence of congenital syphilis. But the good thing is the transmission of syphilis to the fetus does not occur before 4th month, but occurs after 6 months. So infection of the fetus is most likely to occur if the mother has either primary syphilis or secondary syphilis, not tertiary. So routinely during antenatal care, women's blood is tested for syphilis at the first antenatal visit, and if it is found to be positive, she has to be given treatment. If negative, then to be tested again in late pregnancy, ideally. And if she has syphilis infection, she should be given antibiotics for preventing congenital syphilis in the newborn. 10 daily injections of procaine penicillin. German measles or rubella is of concern during pregnancy because it causes pregnancy wastage like fetal death or infant death, and among survivors they have congenital defects like cataract, deafness, congenital heart disease, other minor defects. So ideal would be to prevent infection during pregnancy by preventing and controlling rubella in general population, but in many countries vaccination of all school-age children is done, followed by vaccination of all women in the childbearing age if they are found to be seronegative. Not so here. But before vaccinating the women of childbearing age, it should be seen that pregnancy is ruled out. And after vaccination, she should use some kind of contraception for 8 weeks. She should not become pregnant after the measles vaccination because measles vaccine is a live attenuated vaccine. Next is determination of Rh status of the mother and what to do if she is Rh negative. Why do we need to know if she is Rh negative or not? Now normally the fetal circulation is separated from maternal circulation by placenta, but some fetal RBCs may enter maternal circulation, especially during later pregnancy, during labor when some intermixing of blood may take place, during cesarean section, during therapeutic abortion, while performing external cephalic version, and sometimes spontaneously in later pregnancy. If the mother happens to be Rh negative and the fetus is Rh positive, this intermingling provokes formation of Rh antibodies in maternal blood, and this is known as isoimmunization. These Rh antibodies can cross placenta and can attack the RBCs of the fetus, causing fetal hemolysis. But as the exposure to fetal RBCs occurs late in pregnancy, mostly during labor, the first child, even if he is Rh positive, is spared because by the time the maternal body reacts and forms antibodies, delivery has taken place and the fetus is born. But during subsequent pregnancies, if these are with an Rh positive child, the mother can react to the smallest intrusion, which may occur a little earlier than labor, and produce antibodies which can cause the placenta and cause hemolysis in the fetus. The clinical presentation may be hydrocephalus, icterus gravis, neonatorum, kernicterus, congenital hemolytic anemia, which are all very serious situations. That is why there is a need to determine the maternal blood group, And RH blood group and RH typing is to be done routinely and during early pregnancy, so that there is time to prepare for RH negative mother. If the woman is found to be RH negative and the husband is RH positive, she is kept under surveillance for RH antibody levels while antenatal care is being delivered. So the blood is examined for antibodies at 28 weeks of gestation and 34 to 36 weeks for presence of RH antibodies. Such mother is given RH anti-D immunoglobulin, that is ready-made RH antibodies is given at 28 weeks of gestation, and if after delivery baby's blood is also tested, and if the baby is RH positive, the mother is given anti-D immunoglobulin once again within 72 hours of delivery or of abortion if she is aborted. This is done so that the anti-RH immunoglobulin destroys any fetal cell that may have altered the maternal circulation before it has had chance to form antibodies. Post-maturity should be avoided in such cases so as to minimize the chances the fetal RBCs can enter the maternal circulation. If there is any evidence of hemolysis in utero, that is in the fetus, mother has to be shifted to an equipped center, a well-equipped center which is specialized to deal with RH problems. Checking for HIV infection. HIV infection checking is important because HIV infection can pass from an infected mother to the fetus, either through placenta while she is pregnant or during delivery when intermixing of blood takes place, and even by breastfeeding. And the risk of passing the infection to the fetus is around 33%, that is 1/3 of HIV positive mothers will infect their fetus or the newborn through these above three routes. And this risk is even higher if the mother is newly infected with HIV or already has an advanced stage, that is she has developed AIDS. Hence, prenatal HIV testing is important, but as it cannot be forced on anybody without her consent as per the present laws, voluntary prenatal HIV testing should be done and should be done as early as possible in the pregnancy, especially in women who are at high risk. Who are the women at high risk? If she has multiple sexual partners or her husband or her partner has a number of sexual partners, if she has an STD, if she is an IV drug user or her partner is an IV drug user. It is contemplated that in high prevalence areas, even universal but confidential voluntary screening of all pregnant women would allow the infected women to have a choice of therapeutic abortion if she doesn't want the pregnancy, if she doesn't want the pregnancy, and to make informed decision on whether or not to breastfeed the child, and to receive appropriate care. If she is diagnosed early in the pregnancy to be HIV positive, she can receive appropriate prophylactic care according to the national guidelines for prevention of vertical transmission, linkages to support system for HIV positive, prophylaxis to the child. Then checking for hepatitis B infection. All antenatal women should be checked for hepatitis B infection because it is believed that a high prevalence of hepatitis B infection in some areas may be because of spread of hepatitis B from carrier mothers to their babies. And most of these infections, they appear to occur at birth when the intermixing of blood takes place. Hence, if the mother is hepatitis B infection positive, she can transmit the infection to the child, especially more if she is both surface antigen and E antigen positive. So the transmission to baby can occur after delivery also. Hence, this vertical transmission can be blocked by, if the mother is positive, then the child, newborn, should be administered immunoglobulin for against hepatitis B immediately, and hepatitis B vaccine should be given immediately to the newborn baby. a word about prenatal screening for genetic defects. These include screening for those diseases, those chromosomal abnormalities which are associated with serious defects in the newborn. And there is a direct evidence of congenital structural anomalies for hemoglobinopathies and other inherited conditions which are detectable by sufficient confidence by biochemical assays. But universal genetic screening is generally not recommended. But the screening is offered to those who need it to make the option of therapeutic abortion in case severe defects are detected. Example of prenatal genetic screening is screening for trisomy 21 and severe neural tube defects. Women who are at high risk for these and who should be screened include those pregnant women who are 35 years or above, or those who already have an afflicted child. Mental preparation of the mother for delivery and child rearing is an important aspect of antenatal care. It removes her fears about pregnancy, delivery and child rearing. Hence, sufficient time and opportunity must be given to have a free and frank talk on all aspects of pregnancy, delivery and child rearing. Mothercraft classes can be conducted at the MCH centers, which can be very helpful in this. Regarding mental preparation for family planning. Family planning is related to every phase of maternity cycle. That means limitation of family size is helps the mother's health. At any maternity cycle, she should be suggested, she should be convinced for the benefits of limiting family size. But the mother is psychologically more receptive to the advice on family planning at this time during pregnancy, childbirth, than at other times. So she should be motivated at this time to adopt spacing or preparatory sterilization after the delivery, as the case may be. The All India Postpartum Program services are available to all expectant mothers in India. Pediatric component of antenatal care. A pediatrician should ideally attend the antenatal clinics to attend to the under 5s accompanying the mothers. Now, a word about risk approach in antenatal care. Risk approach. The main purpose of risk approach in antenatal care is to identify those antenatal cases who are at high risk. Identify these high risk cases from a large antenatal population and as early as possible during pregnancy, and giving them special care through skilled care providers, while routine appropriate care is given to all the remaining cases. So the antenatal high risk women are elderly primee, that is primee who is 30 years or more, short statured primee, a primee who is 140 centimeters or smaller, malpresentations like breech, transverse lie, history of antepartum hemorrhage or threatened abortion, preeclampsia and eclampsia, presence of anemia, twins, hydramnios, bad obstetric history including previous stillbirths, previous intrauterine deaths, requirement of manual removal of placenta in previous histories, previous pregnancies, early grand multipara, even if she is multipara but if she is elderly, so elderly grand multipara, prolonged pregnancy, that is 14 days, 2 weeks after post expected date of delivery, history of previous cesarean section or history of previous instrumental delivery, pregnancy which is associated with general diseases like cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, diabetes, liver disease, malaria, HIV, RTA, etc. Delivery which has occurred after treatment for infertility. Those who have had 3 or more spontaneous consecutive abortions. The risk approach is actually a managerial tool for improving the maternal and child health care. Why? Because it provides better services to all, but special attention to those who need them the most. So this approach, the risk approach, achieves maximum utilization of resources. It enables unconventional human resources to be involved in providing antenatal care. For example, traditional birth attendants among those who have a normal, uncomplicated antenatal period, involvement of community health workers, etc. for routine, and specialists for high risk. Hence, risk approach improves both the coverage of MCH care and the quality of MCH care. Then records in antenatal care. A mother and child protection card should be filled up for every woman who is registered. This card contains the registration number of the mother, her identification data, previous history, main health events in her life, and this record is to be handed over to the woman. She is instructed to bring the record with her during all antenatal visits. Also, she is instructed to carry the card along at the time of her delivery. This card has been developed by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and Ministry of Women and Child Welfare. The purpose of the card is to maintain uniformity in record keeping, and this also helps the service provider to know the details of previous antenatal and postnatal care, both routine and emergency care as required. The information contained in the card should also be recorded in antenatal register as per the HMIS format. Home visits. Home visits form the backbone of MCH services. It is suggested that expectant mothers must be paid at least one home visit by either female health worker or public health nurse. And more visits are required if the delivery is planned at home, because the mother is generally relaxed at home, and a home visit by the health worker will win her confidence. And visit also provides an opportunity to observe the environmental and social conditions at home, for the opportunity to give prenatal advice to the mother and the family members.